Hello, my name's Tom Brady, and welcome to the Tasting Sessions by the Oxford Wine Company, a short form version of the Oxford Wine and Spirits podcast, where we take a few moments to sample something a little bit delicious. It's March 2024, and this month we're celebrating the producers we work with here at the Oxford Wine Company who have achieved a B-Corp certification. My guest today is Matt Hastings, Master Blender at the B-Corp Certified Nc'nean Distillery, and today we're going to be tasting the Gordon, part of the Quiet Rebels series, released, I think, back in September 2023.
Correct.
Matt Hastings, a very warm welcome. In my opinion, you have one of the most envious job titles in the world of wine and spirits. For those listening at home, do you think you could tell us a little bit about who you are and your role at the distillery?
Yeah, I certainly can. Thank you for having me. I'm Matthew Hastings. I am the blender for Nc'nean. I am also our on-trade brand ambassador, so I look after all the bars and restaurants in the UK, as well as quite a lot of export as well. I do all of our photography and videography as well, and some marketing, and a million other things. When you're a teeny tiny company, everyone's got a pitch in a little bit everywhere.
So Nc'nean is a distillery that's really going from strength to strength right now. Could you give us a little introduction into who you folks are and some of the awesome stuff that you've been doing?
Oh, certainly can. So we're Nc'nean. I like to say we're comfortably the most sustainable distillery in Scotland, and that's probably as close to the truth as it can be. Everything about our distillery is built on these two founding principles of either innovation or sustainability, ideally both. So everything we do is about making the most interesting, accessible whiskey that we can in the best way for the planet. And some of the big things that we do, we are completely organic. In fact, we're the only completely organic distillery in Scotland, and we only use organic Scottish barley, which is fantastic for a number of reasons, which I'll get very nerdy about later, I'm sure. We are powered completely by renewable energy, so we have an on-site biomass boiler rather than using fossil fuels to generate power for distillation. That one switch alone reduces the carbon footprint on-site by 90%, 90, which is an enormous carbon saving, obviously. We're also net carbon zero on-site and carbon neutral filter gate in our supply chain. We're also bottled in 100% recycled glass. We were the first whiskey in the world to do that. And a million other things. There's loads. All of it's kind of very neatly surmised by our B-Corp certification, which covers some of the environmental things as well as some of the community back things that we do in Nc'nean.
What a fantastic segue. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about B-Corp and what it means to be B-Corp certified and how the values of Nc'nean as a distillery and as a company kind of integrates with B-Corp certification.
Yeah, of course. So for those that don't know, B-Corp companies, I think there's 8,000 of us around the world now, and it covers all sorts of disparate fields, everything from clothing to architecture to law firms to food to any business that you can think of. If you're a business, you can apply for B-Corp certification. And we highly encourage every business that possibly can, even just to go through the initial steps, because even going through that first bit of paperwork can show you so many better things that you can do for your company. It's half of the reason that we're in B Corp, was to see what we could do better. But on B Corp, the B stands for benefits, and it means that your company equally weighs in decision making profit, people, and planet. So got to be a business, got to make money, but you've also got to look after your community, look after your customers, look after your staff, look after your local community, and you've also got to look after the planet whilst doing these things. It's scored out of 200 points. It's utterly impossible to score 200 points. If a standard UK business were to go through certification, they'd probably score about 50 points, which would not pass. The pass mark is 80, and any company that's scoring 80 points and above is doing great things for the planet. If you're getting over 100, you're probably doing exceptionally well for the planet. We scored 135.6. It is the highest score in the spirits industry globally, and it's because every element of what we do goes through this lens of, can we do this in a better way for the planet? And if we can, then we do. And that's, like I say, every little detail. It's why we're a zero waste distillery. We're a low water usage distillery, low chemical usage distillery. Very charitable in lots of our actions. Like the first whiskey that we ever released, we auctioned bottle number 1 for charity, and it broke the record for an inaugural release bottling 4 times over. So it sold for £41,004, which is quite a nice achievement and quite a nice chunk of cash raised for our, at the time, 5 chosen charities. But yeah, that's broadly the approach. It's better business is the way that the B Corp mindset should be, and it's this constant improvement as well. The idea is that it's not, oh, we've worked really hard, we've ticked this box, therefore we get this score. It's, cool, you've done this. how do you keep going? How do you keep getting better? How do you keep improving? You have to recertify every 3 years, and the idea is you get better and better every year.
Fantastic. I didn't realize you had to recertify, because I know it takes so long for companies to actually get to the point where they're able to achieve
Yeah.
B Corp. When did you guys achieve it?
I think we officially got our score in December 2020. It would have been 2021. Gosh, no. Either way, we're coming up to the end of our 3-year period now, so I'm not very good with numbers. However long that is, by the end of this year, it will be the end of our 3rd year. So we'll need. We're spending this year. You go through the recertification process in your last of your 3 years. They say you've got kind of 1 year to celebrate, 1 year to reevaluate, and then 1 year to implement based off your reevaluation. And then the idea being that your score improves and you as a company improve, because the framework is constantly changing as well, because they're constantly finding out what's better for business, especially when they're covering these kind of very big, broad categories, like what's better for whiskey distillation is not what's better for fast fashion, or what's better for coffee, or what's better for law firms or whatever.
I really love the fact that, one, it is just an ongoing process, which is great, and you can't rest on your laurels, which is really, really good as well. But I love the fact as well that it transcends the genres in terms of it's not just an organic certification. It goes into people, it goes into everything, and really, if you're achieving that certification, you've got nowhere to hide, to be fair, right?
It's now become this very, very big thing. But as a general baseline for excellence, like if you see that someone at least at that company has thought, right, how can we be better? How can we do better? And then how can we showcase that we are doing better than those around us?
Brilliant. So let's move on. We're tasting the Gordon today, and I'd say it's quite an off-piste name in terms of limited batch release.
Yeah,
I've got the bottle right here. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on? Why was it named Gordon?
Okay, right. At Nc'nean, realistically, we only make one whiskey all year round. Nc'nean Organic, our kind of flagship, and that's designed to be this very approachable, accessible, like just a very easy way to get people into the category of whiskey. Our goal is to get more people excited about whiskey, but we're aware that there's already this audience that loves whiskey, is fanatical about whiskey, so we need to make things for them as well. And we do this in a multitude of ways. We do some single casts. We work with independent bottlers to release some of the funkier stuff. But the 2 big things from Nc'nean themselves, we have 2 seasonal releases. Every spring, we release something called Huntress, which will change every year, but it's all about experimental production and playing around with the very building blocks of whiskey. So playing around with barley, playing around with yeast, playing around with fermentation time, playing around with cut points, like all the stuff that doesn't normally get played with in whiskey. We mess around with that, find the best of the results, and release that every spring. Every autumn, we release something called Quiet Rebels, and it's by far the most fun I get to have every year, because it's not only just creating a new whiskey every year, it's having an entirely different approach to creating whiskey every year. So the way the Quiet Rebel system works, I sit down with someone that works for the company. We do it in order of when you've joined, so whoever was first through the door is first in line for their release. But we sit down with them, discuss what they like about whiskey, find some whiskies that they might enjoy, do some tasting, etc. But the result is we'll blend a whiskey with them, for them, from our stock, and we'll release it. And it's not like marketing hyperbole. Every year, genuinely, I try to make a whiskey specifically for one person that works for the company to suit them, be about everything that they love about whiskey, everything they like about the taste or its ethos or its approach. And then we release it. So we're drinking Gordon because Gordon was number 3 in line. So Annabelle was our founder CEO. Annabelle got to go first. Lorna was our first employee in 2015, making dinner for builders for 2 years, bless her, because there's no Deliveroo or supermarkets or restaurants on the Northern Peninsula, so you've got to feed plumbers and ground workers and all that jazz. And she's now one of our main distillers, which is it's amazing that she's stayed with us all this time. And then the same with Gordon. So Gordon joined us in 2017. He's our distillery manager. He was the most traditional kind of whiskey head we had in the company. He started out as an apprentice coppersmith for United Distillers, who are now Diageo. So he used to make copper pot stills. He ended up working in production.
Well, that would have been back in the day, wouldn't it?
Proper back in the day, yeah. He ended up working in production at Oban, and then we poached him from Oban to come and run our distillery. And he likes very heavy, rich, sherried, full, chewy. I say gouty. It sounds like it's not the correct term to use, but it's realistically it's the kind of whiskey that he likes. He likes these big, decadent things. Which is a really fun challenge because it's not something that we make in it. We explicitly make this light, fruity, floral, delicate, creamy style of whiskey. So how do I create this full, heavy, decadent thing for him to suit his tastes? So we settled on a slightly unusual cask blend for us. It's 74% STR red wine, 19% sherry, and 7% Riva salt. So the 74% at the start, the STR red wine, the bread and butter for this. And I always think of it as it is like bread and butter, really. STR, if you don't know, it stands for shaved, toasted, and recharred. So we have these red wine casks that have previously been used for something like Rioja or, well, Tempranillo, like anything kind of like fruity, vibrant European wine. Well, then it'll have reached the end of its useful maturation period. 5 to 7 years, something like that, and then we'll recondition the cask. And we do this by taking the heads off. You shave 2 millimeters off of the inside of the wood, so you get rid of the dead layer of carbon, you get rid of the dead layer of oak. You're left with this very fresh layer for maturation, which is very impactful. But then you toast and rechar the cask, and this process not only rejuvenates that oak, but it also caramelizes any of the residual wine sugars that are left in the staves, and then those fall into solution really easily. So we've got these big, heavy Maillard compounds that taste like bread and toast and jam, and they're full and weighty. Almost, I always say like Maillard because it's not like it's toffee, it's not like it's really like caramelized sweet, it's like caramelized dry. So that's the base of the whiskey. Then seasoned it with 19% sherry, which is enormous for us. I normally use 2% sherry, and I think of it as like salt and pepper because it's this kind of delicate thing to play with. But we knew that this one needed to be a big, heavy dram, so we've gone up to 19%. And they're traditional 500-litre Oloroso sherry butts, and that's your Christmas cake, your juicy fruits, your spice. It's sherry cask. It's what you expect. The
All the
last
good stuff.
Yeah, the last 7% is Riva salt, which is a red French sweet wine. That should have added more sweetness, more decadence. But in our case, the 2 casks that we had remaining, we only bought 3. We released one as a single cask, which was divine, and then these other 2, they were good. They were great flavors, but they were just very acidic. They were very sharp and very bright, so they didn't really work on their own. But that made them very, very good for mixing. So in this case, we've kept the same flavor profile of all this decadent fruit, but we've added just enough acidity to give it some zip, give it some balance, give it some levity in what would have been, it's very full, almost flabby whiskey is now brighter, zippier, fresh.
Fantastic. And I mean, I think the STR thing comes across really well, and along with the Rive salt, because that's Grenache, right? That's spent time in those casks before. It contributes there. I think it's the STR as well, but there's so much red fruit coming out of this whiskey. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Should we have a little nose?
Yes, please.
I get a lot of cereal character on everything I try from Nc'nean. I'm guessing that's coming from the raw material. That's coming from the barley. Are you taking obviously organic barley, but is that coming from across Scotland or is it quite localized?
Barley that we use, 100% organic, 100% organic Scottish barley. What we're tasting today will be a mixture of 10 farms. We were previously using a different malting company because there were no organic maltsters in Scotland, which was a pain, to be honest. So we were using a company who were based in Yorkshire. So we were growing barley in Scotland, sending it down to Yorkshire, and then coming back up to us after it's been malted, which was the best solution available at the time. But since then, better solutions have become available. So a couple of years ago, we switched to Baird's, who are based up in Inverness, who now have organic malting facilities up in Inverness, which is fantastic. And since we've moved to them, we now reduced it down to 3 farms, and we can now split by farm as well, which is much better. So we can say, we've got, Concerto coming from, I can't remember the names off the top of my head, but one of the 3 farms coming in for this block of time or whatever. It gives us a little bit more control, and it means we can also work a little bit closer with the farmers when there's only 3 of them. We can sort of message them and say, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing this? Which it feeds back into how you operate as a B-Corp company. To get that kind of barley characteristics across, there's a couple of things. One, I fundamentally believe that organic barley makes a substantial difference compared to commercially farmed barley. And the kind of fag packet science behind it is that organic barley, whilst it has the same level of nutrients, has a much broader range of nutrients. you've got this much wider range of interesting nitrates and things that yeast are going to end up eating. And when yeast eat more complicated things, they produce more complicated things on the other side, which in terms of esters are longer chain esters, which are fats. So you're getting what I find in a lot of organic produce, especially in whiskey, is it's creamier, it's fattier, it's fuller. You just get better, richer texture. The way that we operate in Nc'nean would result in a less barley forward spirit. So we run a hyperclear wash, or hyperclear wort, sorry, going into the wash. So we recirculate in the mash tun, which means we're pumping the liquid out of the mash tun back over the top of itself, and it's filtering over the husks again and again and again until it's hyperclear, which gives you more of this kind of blank canvas for yeast to do its job on, because we want these yeast flavors, we want these mid-chain and long-chain esters with juicy fruits and fats. But we still wanted this barley characteristic, so we do a very long rest time in the mash tun, which again is very uncommon in Scotland. So once our first waters have gone in, we'll let it sit for an hour, basically making like barley tea, which normally you'd just be trying to extract the sugars, but in our case, we're trying to extract as much barley flavour as possible, knowing that we're going to be recirculating. It's not dissimilar to like in Irish whiskey where you're using unmalted barley, but then you're triple distilling, where you're packing in more flavour in this early stage, knowing that you're going to be filtering out more later, and you get this level balance in the end. We do the similar thing of we're using organic barley, which is very rich, and then we're using this long sit time to pack in more flavour, and then we're running that hyperclear filtration. So we're ending up with the chemical basis that we want for fermentation, but with barley characteristics and flavour. So yeah, that does come across as that malty cereal characteristics. It plays up really, really nicely with all those juicy fruits. So the cask varieties that we've used and our fermentation process all add juicy fruits in one form or another. So we're getting these fresh peaches, apricots from the fermentation, and then we're getting the more jammy, stewed, sweeter fruits from the casks.
You're absolutely right with what you said earlier. There is a lovely kind of zesty citrus backbone that kind of runs along the nose of this whiskey. It's fantastic. It kind of balances everything. And yeah, you're right. I think something would be lacking if you didn't have that, but it kind of brings it all together, ties it all together, and it's a lovely nose. Yeah, there is a richness to it. There is almost like you feel like it's going to be a little bit oily, a little bit viscous on the palate. So I think that's where we should probably go next, right?
Certainly. Sounds about.
That's the bit that's great for radio right there.
Just made a point of muting my speaker, my microphone. It's a bit too.
Someone described my slurping the other day as techers, which I'm not sure is 100% accurate.
No, it's like that pot noodle advert that's on telly at the moment. It drives me absolutely insane. It's annoying because with our whiskies, you do really want to sit there and go like you do want to chew, because we've got such viscosity and oiliness. Like it is lip smacking, and it's saliva inducing. Like you really want to chew it, and like you're actually trying to digest it more than just trying to like taste the flavors.
It's not something I've really considered before with Nc'nean, but it's definitely there on this whiskey. I'm going to have to go back and try a few more. I mean, for me, I hate to generalize, but for me, that just defines West Coast Scotch whiskey. It's that real sort of that oiliness, that, as you said, decadence that you see in things like in your Obans and even in your Ardnamurchan these days. I think it's really, really there, without, of course, any sort of notion of peat or anything like that. So it's a really cool, really interesting, really different style. And then the finish, it's just, I mean, it's still there. It's still sitting there. The weightiness of it, I mean, I'm still getting it on like across the palate.
That's why we aim for these long chain fatty acid esters. I know it's like I talk about the geeky sciencey bits, but it's by far the most interesting thing for me, because it's the answer for why does this do this. And in this case, like we've got this very light style whiskey. In this case, we have picked a heavier version, but even then, we've got a very long finish comparatively across all of our whiskies. And it's because of those long chain fatty acid esters. They are fats. They are actual oil. A bottle of olive oil is a bottle of long chain fatty acid esters. And as such, it's oil. It sticks, and it sticks to your tongue. And as these compounds are stuck to your tongue, they are dragging everything else along with it, not just the fats, but all the other flavor compounds. So because it's physically stuck there, you're going to physically keep tasting it for as long as it's there. And it's, like I said, it's a characteristic that I find in organic whiskey. It's a characteristic that you'll find in West Coast distilleries and West Coast whiskies in general. That's more of a still profile quirk more than anything. Normally it will be like descending line arms, and you're trying to take as many like shorter stills, descending line arms, get all these heavy fat compounds. It's just that traditionally that would involve getting a very heavy whiskey, whereas we've taken this stylistic approach of having taller stills, only a slightly descending line arm to get the fats that we want, but creating this lighter profile spirit along with those fats.
Fantastic. All right, I think that's nearly all the time we have. But Matt, thank you so much for talking us through such a tasty dram. Before we leave you, there's just enough time for some shameless shout outs. You can follow Matt and Nc'nean on Instagram. Matt, what are the handles that people need to search for?
For Nc'nean, it's just Nc'nean, Nc'nean, nice and easy. And then I'm Whiskey Matthew, which is also relatively easy. Whiskey with no E, Matthew with two T's.
And then, of course, you can follow me on @WhatTomDrank, and of course, the Oxford Wine Company on @TheOxfordWineCompany, where I believe we'll be raffling off a bottle of Nc'nean a little bit later in the month.
Ooh, fun.
So there we go. There's the shameless shout outs. Matt, thank you so much for joining me. This has been fantastic. Cheers.
Thank you for having me. Sorry, I banged on about esters for too long.
Love esters. It's all good.